by becoming rich.
Take all your money, buy Bitcoin.
I say when we
You can
sell.
wake up every morning and say GM.
GM. Daily levels. 11th of July, Thursday. You're looking at my amazing artwork from Wipeout Wednesday. Explaining shorting. GM. So, what are we looking at here? BTC, ETH, the market as a whole is doing what I mentioned the other day. So first of all, resistant to going down. That'll be the main thing, which you notice. We had that bullish divergence we talked about on the RSI. From my study, that probably leads to about 30 days or so of no new lows. Could be more, could be less. Could be the actual bottom, might just be a stopover. There isn't a very clear indication that a bull div equals the actual bottom. A lot of times it just is what it is, which is weakness, right? When the RSI resets all the way back to 30, and then, even if it does a bull div or not, if you just look at instances where Bitcoin goes back to 30, whether it's bull div or not, if it just goes to that level, what happens? Goes to it, spends a couple months building up energy before going higher, goes to 30 over here. That's one of the examples where it V reverses, but of course we obviously don't have that. It's now been 6 or 7 days. Well, actually, sorry, it's been, since Bitcoin first hit 30, it's been 24 through, it's been 3 weeks. So that's obviously definitely not what we're doing. Over here, hit the lows in 9th of November. We ended up moving back up again on 12th of January, about 6 weeks later. Over here, we hit 30 and did a bull div on the 6th of September, 28th of August, 6th of September. We ended up not bottoming until November. Hit it over here, right? Sideways, kind of chopping higher, not like mooning. I'll ignore all the ones throughout the bear market because obviously you know how they went. They didn't moon right away. Let's go back to even early bulls or within bulls. So COVID, V reverse, pretty much. Kind of a slower V reversal. It was waited a few days, but then it started to grind higher and grind higher and grind higher and build value and do higher highs and higher lows, which is good to see. But obviously that was post-COVID, so hard to read much into that. And then you'll notice we don't hit 30 in bull markets. And if we do, 2 months, right? 2 months, grinding down, retest, moving back up. So you have to even go back further than that. You got throughout the 2019 move, which some people are saying, could this be the 2019 sort of equivalent, where Bitcoin made an all-time high, but the rest of the market didn't. Most of the rest of the market looks something like this, right? Doesn't quite get to its old all-time high, comes up towards it and retraces. So over there when it hit, it was not the bottom, obviously. Over here when it hit, it was a bottom 24th of November, bottomed about 3 weeks later and led to a 4 or 5 week rally before we eventually crashed into COVID. Even here, that was the bottom of the previous bear market, hit 30, went lower, 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 and then from the very bottom in December 18 until April, so we went sideways for about 3 months. And same again, right? Here, bottoms out, has a push up, but comes back to form a floor, which obviously then gives way. And the parabolic bull run of 2016-17, here you have probably the best examples of price hitting below 30 and then, continuing. But of course, this didn't do what we did. So it went below it. Straight away, that was the bottom. Bounced back up. Consolidated at a higher price for, again, like before it got above the breakdown level. So the breakdown point was there. It broke down into the bottom on 2nd of August. And it ended up breaking higher on the 26th of October. Right? So that's 10 weeks. Over here we had one. This is a quick shakeout. Within a few days, we broke it all structure back to bullish. Obviously, we haven't done that in this instance. Here, same thing. Although, actually, before breaking market structure bullish again, which would be this daily high, that was the 15th of September. We broke above it on the 9th of October. So, 3 weeks. So on and so on and so on, then the bull market's over. So, obviously, you can dig down more into that if you want to go into specifics. But the data is pretty clear for Bitcoin and just for really anything. If you even just look at other equivalent, similar assets that Bitcoin is compared to and has decent correlations to, like gold. Gold got pulled down in 2023 below that 30. That was right into the war in Gaza, which was a V reversal. See other times where it touches 30 over here in 2022. It's not the bottom. Touched it again here. Bottoms out briefly, but then goes lower. Touches it again here from September. Ends up eventually reversing in November, right? So about 6 weeks later. And so this is something that's true of assets all over. Like, how many times does that type of structure or setup actually equal a bottom before an immediate push to new highs? Like, this is what we're looking at. This is what we're trying to, figure out. You've got an example here of a bull div, and I'm trying to show one that's actually like similar, right? You want to see gold in a really strong uptrend. Yeah, that's pretty strong uptrend. Goes all the way from 400 to over 1,000. It then pulls back, drops down, does a bullish divergence over here, has a strong rally into resistance, then goes lower, and then bottoms out. And that actually was the bottom for gold. That was the generational bottom. Never came back to that level. So that's a huge, high time frame bottom. And how did it actually form? It didn't form in the way that people want it to form, right? If you look at like BTC in comparison. Nobody would say that that wasn't a great place to buy gold. And yet, it did the bull div, and then it invalidated the bull div by flushing lower, and probably caught a lot of people out and made a lot of people bearish, which again is kind of what price tends to do. So you've seen your bull div here, right? So both were in strong trends up, both had a bit of a sideways correction before having a sell-off through the lows. Actually, a lot of similarities here. But the main thing I'm looking at here is what happens next with this bullish divergence on BTC. We clearly have one, right? Price went lower, RSI went higher. And so, could you see a strong, sharp rally like the one on gold? Well, my thoughts on those sharp rallies. The faster you rally up, the more inefficiency you leave behind. So that would be the one you'd expect to come back down to the lows, whether it goes to new lows or just back to the lows. What you actually want to see, more so if you're looking at the bottom being in and no retracement back to it, is kind of what you see on gold after this, which is where it builds up and actually builds levels, support resistance, and builds through them, consolidates, builds through them, consolidates. That's where you're seeing something more constructive on the way up, right? So, depending on what BTC does now, I would say the highest likelihood is month or two of more chop, more sideways, more down, more sideways, more a little bit of up, whatever it's going to be, like almost every example of when you have an RSI reset, it leads to some kind of this, and if it's bullish, then it goes up, or of course it goes like that, maybe it goes down a bit more. And apart from that, like one example on gold, and I guess there's a couple of examples on Bitcoin back in like 2019 where you saw this kind of move, and then it had that squeeze, but of course that led to new lows, and then it bottomed out there, right? So if you're looking at BTC, out of all of that, the only trades that make sense around here really are longs, if they present. But that doesn't mean the bottom's in here. It just means that getting long would be the preferred option from wherever you're looking at it, right? It's like, that might be, by the way, that might be just playing a continuation here. And if you're lucky, you get that strong squeeze. You take profit above these highs. Or you just wait for a more clear bottom to form, right? Which I mentioned a bunch of paths on yesterday's daily levels, so I won't retread that old ground, right? Those paths are clearly laid out. I think I have them here on this volume profile. Yeah. Any one of those paths I see as likely. The first move I was expecting started yesterday, but it rejected back down. I still expect something where Bitcoin can squeeze higher up into this area and then either drop back, go for a sweep of the lows and form more of a rounded bottom, or if it holds up here, consolidate to go higher. ETH. So still waiting on ETH to just have that squeeze up into those highs. Well, actually, if I leave that on and we go to the 4 hour and we look now, I want to see how ETH's 4 hour bands are looking. Yeah, ETH's been holding that pretty well. Seems to be resistant to the downside move so far. And I think that you can see it have a move up into those bands. Although the way I'm looking at that, it doesn't really fill me with massive amounts of confidence in terms of the next direction. Right? It's more of a grinding move rather than any kind of impulsive move that would have you feel that a bottom's in. Meaning, even if ETH goes up here, I'd expect that that resistance holds initially and then it comes back down into the gap. And if that's the bottom, then it'll bottom out from there and it'll continue on. But it would lead me into saying that once this resistance gets tested, it probably goes back to that support. That would be the expectation I'd have there. Solana. So Solana's the closest. So you look at ETH, nowhere near its bands. To Bitcoin, nowhere near its bands. Solana's the closest to actually flipping back into a bullish trend on the EMA bands. And it hasn't yet, and it's obviously still below the point of control of all this volume distribution. So you can look at this and say let's just take it from the top actually. From the top to where we are now. So that's when the uptrend ended to where we are now. We're trying to see, is this downtrend going to end? I would look at Solana and say, while it looks good-ish, right? It is still distributing the vast majority of volume at the bottom, at the low end of this range, which if we get above that is very good. So if Solana moves up towards the highs, you have a huge amount of support below. So any moves up Solana can make, if it then that kind of tops out and pulls back, that should be a really strong dip to buy. Like that type of pullback should be a blind, no questions asked, buy that dip. I would like to see it go up and break a couple of structures bullish first, so that then that pullback is worth buying. So that's the good side. The good side is that Solana is building a massive base here if it does show bullish. Obviously, the bad side is you flip that, you lose that level, and you've got this huge amount of resistance that Solana probably won't get through and will go lower. So I see Sol as having probably one of the most instructive charts of all, because if you're looking at this is probably going to give a decent indication to the general market direction for the next few weeks, and it's building that right now. So it's building that turning point as we speak, meaning this is clearly going to become, this 140 to 150 area is clearly going to become a major support or resistance in future. So it's one of those areas where you don't trade it right now. At least I certainly wouldn't trade it right now. It's not part of my system. But in future, this becomes a massive level. Now, if the bands go green, so if Sol's able to flip above, this kind of 145 and the bands go green, excuse me, you probably get quite an nice easy continuation long to at least 155 and probably into that gap at about 167 before it runs into real major resistance. So for your day traders or multi-day swing traders, there's probably a trade to be had there. But of course, for me, I would need bands green, right? And once you see those bands turn green, you probably get a few days of upside, something similar to that. That could all come today, by the way. Obviously, CPI is the big one. And on trade of the day, I'm going to break down CPI and I'm actually going to give you an exact system idea. I want to show you the logic with which I trade news events. Some of the purple belts have already seen this. If you're not a purple belt, you're getting some alpha right now. So, trade of the day, check that out. Bitcoin, ETH, Solana covered. CPI day. Trump sentencing. Trump was supposed to be sentenced today. That got delayed. It's been delayed until September. And my top G, Johnson, has informed me, interestingly, that the date they moved it to, right? So the date that they moved Trump's sentencing to is the same day as the next FOMC, the September one. So we have a July one at the 31st of July. And at the September FOMC, the same day is Trump's sentencing. Very interesting. So we'll see what happens there. GM.